Winter in medieval England wasn't just cold, it was a death sentence wrapped in ice. No central heating, no electricity, no modern insulation. Just brutal, relentless cold that killed thousands every single year. But here's what nobody tells you. The peasants who survived weren't just lucky, they were brilliant. They developed survival techniques so clever, so ingeniously simple, that modern survival experts are now copying them. Today, I'm revealing the medieval cold hacks that kept people alive when temperatures dropped below freezing for months on end. Meet Thomas, a 28-year-old English peasant living through the winter of 1320 in rural Yorkshire. Outside his cottage, snow is 3 feet deep. The wind cuts like knives. Temperatures have been below freezing for 6 straight weeks. Thomas has no modern technology, barely any resources, and a family of 5 to keep alive. But Thomas knows something we've forgotten. He knows the old ways, the survival hacks passed down through generations of English peasants who face this nightmare every year. Let me show you how he did it. The first genius hack starts before winter even arrives. In late October, Thomas begins earthing up his cottage. He takes soil, dead leaves, bracken, and even animal manure, and piles it against the outside walls of his wattle and daub house. He's building a thick earth bank all around the base of his cottage, sometimes 2 feet high and 3 feet thick. His neighbors think he's mad, wasting energy on this. But Thomas knows better. That earth bank is insulation. Soil has remarkable thermal properties. It holds heat during the day and releases it slowly at night. That thick layer of earth creates a buffer zone between the freezing outside air and the thin cottage walls. It stops wind from penetrating through cracks at ground level. It prevents the frozen ground from sucking heat out through the floor. Modern survival experts call this earth berming, and it's now taught in wilderness survival courses. Thomas's ancestors figured it out 1,000 years ago through trial and error. Inside the cottage, Thomas has spent weeks preparing the floor. Medieval peasant cottages had dirt floors, literal bare earth. In summer, that's fine. In winter, it's a frozen slab that radiates cold upward like a giant ice pack. So Thomas covers his entire floor with a thick layer of rushes and straw, not just a light scattering, but a dense mat at least 6 inches deep. Then he covers that with woven rush mats. This creates multiple layers of trapped air, which is nature's best insulator. But here's the genius part. Thomas doesn't change this floor covering all winter. Modern people would think that's disgusting, and it is, but it's also a brilliant survival strategy. As the winter progresses, the bottom layers of straw compact down, trap moisture, and even begin to compost slightly. That composting process generates heat. Not much, maybe a few degrees, but when you're fighting hypothermia, every degree counts. Thomas's floor is literally a medieval underfloor heating system powered by controlled decomposition. The walls get special treatment too. November, before the worst cold hits, Thomas and his wife Margaret pack the inside walls with dried bracken, heather and moss stuffed into every crack and gap in the wattle and daub. Then they hang their few possessions, spare clothes, sacks, even dried animal hides on the walls. Finally, they tack up old wool blankets or cloth hangings if they have any. This creates an air gap between the cold wall and the living space. That trapped air is insulation. Medieval people didn't understand the physics, but they knew it worked. Wealthy manor houses took this further with tapestries. Those huge decorative wall hangings weren't just for show. They were functional insulation that could raise a room's temperature by several degrees. Thomas can't afford tapestries, but he achieves the same effect with layers of whatever fabric and material he can gather. By December, his cottage walls are essentially padded, creating a crude but effective thermal envelope. Now let's talk about fire management. This is where medieval peasants were absolute masters. Thomas doesn't have a fireplace with a chimney like wealthy people. He has a central hearth, a circle of stones in the middle of his one-room cottage with a hole in the thatched roof above it. This sounds primitive, but Thomas uses it with remarkable efficiency. First, he never lets the fire go completely out, ever, from November to March. That fire burns continuously, 24 hours a day, for 4 solid months. Letting it die means spending precious time and energy restarting it with flint and steel in a freezing house. More importantly, the stones around the hearth absorb heat during the day. By night, those heated stones radiate warmth for hours. Thomas has essentially created a thermal battery. But the real genius is in fuel management. Good firewood belong to the Lord, and taking wood without permission means severe punishment. So Thomas burns everything else. Dried animal dung, which burns hot and slow. Peat, cut from bogs and dried all summer. Gorse and furze, bushes, dried bracken, even old straw and dried weeds. Medieval peasants became experts at finding and using alternative fuels. Modern survivalists call this opportunistic fuel sourcing. Thomas calls it not freezing to death. He also practices something called banking the fire at night. Before sleeping, Thomas rakes all the hot coals into a compact pile in the center of the hearth, then covers them with a thick layer of ash. This starves the fire of oxygen, making it burn incredibly slowly. The coals stay hot all night under that ash blanket, and in the morning Thomas just brushes away the ash and adds fuel. The fire is still alive. This technique is now taught in primitive firekeeping classes. Thomas learned it from his grandfather. Clothing strategies are equally brilliant. Thomas doesn't have a wardrobe full of winter clothes. He owns one wool tunic, one pair of wool bries, basically underwear pants, one wool cloak, and one pair of leather shoes. That's it. But he knows how to maximize warmth from minimal clothing. The secret is layering and grease. In late autumn, Thomas takes sheep lanolin, the greasy wool fat that collects when you shear sheep, and rubs it into all his wool clothing. This waterproofs the wool and helps it retain heat even when damp. Wool is the only fabric that stays warm when wet, and lanolin makes it even better. He does the same with his leather shoes, coating them in animal fat to waterproof them. Modern outdoors enthusiasts pay premium prices for lanolin-treated wool. Thomas makes his own for free. At night, Thomas and his entire family, wife Margaret, 3 kids aged 3, 6, and 9, plus Thomas's elderly mother, all sleep in one bed. Not for lack of space, but for survival. 5 bodies in one bed create a massive amount of shared body heat. The kids sleep in the middle, adults on the outside. They're all fully clothed, wrapped in their cloaks, under a pile of wool blankets and sheets. The combined body heat can raise the temperature inside that bed cocoon by 2030 degrees compared to the room temperature. This is called collective thermal regulation, and it's how humans survived cold climates for millennia before central heating. Thomas's family is practicing advanced survival technique without knowing the scientific name. They just know that sleeping alone in winter is dangerous, and sleeping together works. But here's a hack that's pure genius: the bed warmer. Before everyone gets into bed, Margaret takes a large stone about the size of a brick that's been sitting by the hearth all evening. She wraps it in several layers of cloth and places it at the foot of the bed. That heated stone stays warm for hours, providing localized heat for cold feet. In wealthier homes, they used metal bedpans filled with hot coals. Thomas's family uses heated stones, and it works just as well. Food storage and preparation shows more brilliance. Thomas's family can't afford to waste any calories. Food is literal fuel for their body heat. In November, Thomas slaughtered their pig and preserved the meat. Some was salted, some was smoked, some was made into sausages packed in the pig's own intestines. Every part of the pig was used. The fat was rendered into lard and stored in clay pots. That lard is pure calories, 9 calories per gram. It's added to everything they eat all winter. Margaret makes a thick pottage every day, a stew of dried beans, oats, root vegetables stored in the cellar, herbs, and whatever meat they can spare. But the secret ingredient is always a big dollop of lard or butter. Fat is essential for cold weather survival. It provides concentrated energy and helps the body maintain core temperature. Medieval peasants' winter diet was incredibly high in fat by modern standards, but it kept them alive. They also drink warm liquids constantly. Small beer a week, safe to drink, fermented beverages heated by the fire, and drunk throughout the day. Warm drinks raise your core temperature immediately and provide calories. Margaret makes hot herbal teas from dried mint, chamomile, and other herbs preserved from summer. Every liquid consumed is warm. Drinking cold water in winter is avoided. It lowers your core temperature and wastes body energy heating it back up. The cellar is another stroke of genius. Thomas dug a storage pit under a corner of his cottage floor about 4 feet deep. This pit stays at a constant cool temperature year-round because of its depth below the frost line. In winter, this pit is warmer than the surface. Root vegetables, turnips, carrots, onions, parsnips are stored here buried in sand. The vegetables don't freeze, and they stay fresh for months. The pit also stores clay pots of preserved foods, apples packed in straw, and the precious seed grain for spring planting. Modern preppers call this a root cellar and consider it essential survival infrastructure. Thomas's ancestors were building them in England before the Norman conquest in 1066. It's ancient technology that works perfectly. Livestock management is crucial too. Thomas keeps his 2 goats in the cottage with the family all winter. Yes, inside the house, the goats generate substantial body heat. The goat's body temperature is around 102 to 103. F2 goats in a small cottage can raise the ambient temperature by several degrees. They also provide fresh milk through winter, which Margaret turns into cheese for extra protein and fat. The smell is terrible, and the goats are messy, but they're more valuable than comfort. In the coldest parts of medieval Scotland and Scandinavia, families brought their cattle inside during winter. A cow generates even more heat than goats. This practice continued in some remote areas into the 1800s. It's not barbaric, animals are living heaters that also provide food. Thomas also practices what we'd now call strategic zoning. The cottage is essentially one room, but Thomas has created zones. The sleeping area is farthest from the door, closest to the fire. The working area is in the middle. The storage area and the goats are nearest the door. The coldest spot near the door is used for the coldest tolerant activities and inhabitants. The warmest spot by the fire and away from drafts is where the family spends most of their time. This is basic thermal management that anyone living in cold climates understands. Daytime activities are optimized for warmth generation. Thomas spends his days doing physical work, threshing grain stored in the barn, repairing tools, cutting and preparing firewood for the next winter, Physical activity generates internal heat. Margaret spins wool, weaves and does other handwork, but all these activities happen as close to the fire as possible. The children are kept busy with small tasks that keep them moving. Sitting still in the cold is dangerous. Movement is warmth. The family also practices something remarkable: sleep shifting. Medieval people didn't sleep 8 hours straight like we try to. Thomas and Margaret sleep in segments. They go to bed shortly after dark around 7 p.m. in deep winter. They sleep for 3 or 4 hours. Then they wake around 11 p.m. or midnight. This is called first sleep. They get up, tend a fire, maybe have a small snack, talk quietly, do small tasks. Then they return to bed for second sleep until dawn. This pattern is called biphasic sleep, and it was normal throughout human history until artificial lighting changed everything. Why does this help with cold survival? Because it means someone tends the fire in the middle of the night. The fire never gets too low. That cottage never gets dangerously cold. It's distributed fire-watching duty. Evolved over centuries of necessity, community survival strategies are equally important. Thomas's village survives winter as a collective. Families share resources. One family's fire goes out, neighbors provide live coals to restart it. If someone's food stores run critically low, the community shares. No one is left to freeze or starve alone if the village can prevent it. This isn't charity, it's survival insurance. Next year, your family might be the one that needs help. The village also shares heat. On the absolute coldest nights, multiple families might crowd into one cottage, combining body heat and sharing one fire rather than trying to heat several buildings. The church is sometimes used as emergency winter shelter for those most at risk: the elderly, sick, or families with new babies. The stone building retains heat better than wattle-and-daub cottages. This communal approach to survival is something modern individualistic society has largely lost, but it was essential in medieval England. You survived winter as a community or not at all. By late March, when the first signs of spring appear, Thomas and his family have made it through another winter. They're thinner, paler, exhausted from months of cold and reduced rations, but they're alive. Thomas's mother, at 62, is still with them. Remarkable longevity for medieval times, achieved through these survival techniques. Not everyone was so fortunate. The village lost old Edmund, who lived alone and whose fire went out one January night. The miller's youngest child, born in December, didn't make it past February. Infants struggled to maintain body temperature. The widow Alice, with no family to share body heat, was found frozen in her bed after a particularly brutal cold snap. But the majority survived because they knew these techniques. These weren't written in books. Most peasants couldn't read. This was oral tradition, passed from parent to child, refined over countless generations of English winters. Each technique had been tested by the ultimate laboratory: death. Methods that didn't work were forgotten. Methods that worked were remembered and passed on. Modern survival experts study these medieval techniques with genuine respect. The earthing up method is taught in permaculture courses. The fire banking technique appears in wilderness survival manuals. The layered clothing approach is fundamental to modern cold weather gear. The communal sleeping for warmth is standard advice for emergency winter survival. The high-fat diet is recommended for polar expeditions. Medieval English peasants weren't primitive or ignorant. They were skilled survival specialists who lived in one of history's harshest environments and developed sophisticated techniques to cope. They were scientists in their own way, running experiments across generations, keeping what worked, discarding what didn't. Thomas doesn't think of himself as clever. He's just doing what his father taught him, what his grandfather taught his father, going back hundreds of years. But that accumulated wisdom is brilliance. That's human ingenuity at its finest. Ordinary people solving extraordinary problems with the resources at hand. So next time you adjust your thermostat because your house is 68 degrees instead of 72, remember Thomas. Remember the medieval peasant who survived months of below freezing temperatures in a one-room mud and stick cottage using nothing but inherited wisdom and determination. Remember that for most of human history, winter wasn't an inconvenience, it was a battle. And our ancestors won that battle using genius hacks we're only now rediscovering. If this gave you new respect for medieval survival intelligence, smash that subscribe button. Next video drops in 4 days, and we're covering medieval food preservation techniques that lasted centuries, some of which are coming back with modern homesteaders. You're going to be shocked at what's possible without refrigeration. See you then.